My name is Melinda Nelson. I was diagnosed with stage 4 adrenocortical carcinoma in November of 2021. I'm currently living in Los Angeles, California. I'm originally from Florida. I kind of bounce all around the world. I love to travel. So I actually, at the time of my diagnosis, I was having so many symptoms for several months and nobody really knew what to do with me. I was going to several doctors at the time and my symptoms were all over the board. So the first one was that I had a swelling face and stomach, and sometimes my feet and hands would swell. I noticed my feet and hands swelling when I would go outside, and I was traveling at the time. I was actually here in Los Angeles, so I thought I was having some type of allergic reaction to something going on outside. I also had unexplained high blood pressure. I'm fully plant-based, and at the time I was like eating very, very well, and so there was really like no reason for my blood pressure to be high. I also found acne on my back and chest. I had a tingling tongue and an itchy tongue, which was very strange. It would only go away if I ate something that was an antihistamine, like foods with antihistamines in them. I also had itching and burning eyes with discharge, and my vision started to get worse. I had hair growth on my upper lip and my chin, and then hair loss on my head, and my scalp was itching and peeling pretty badly. It almost looked like cradle cap. And then I also, in my belly, had a lot of bloating and stomach pain and random food aversion. So, like previously, I was eating so many like fresh vegetables and salads and things like that. And like all of a sudden, I just couldn't tolerate any raw vegetables, which for me is like very rare because I love that. And then also, I was bruising very easily and slow to heal. And eventually, I started missing my period. So, those are all of my symptoms. In terms of like who I was going to try to figure out what was wrong with me, I started with an allergist because, like I said, I was traveling and I thought it was allergies. So I was like, well, let me go see a local allergist because maybe they'll have some answers. Seeing the local allergist was how I found out I had high blood pressure, because I never monitored my blood pressure before that. And she was really worried about it. So I bought a blood pressure cuff for home, and I started monitoring my blood pressure at home. And I would have to like come inside, lay down, and put my feet up to help it go down. And then I was making phone calls to my doctors back in Florida, trying to get some answers. My primary doctor at the time thought, okay, maybe this is an allergic reaction, and thought maybe my blood pressure was a reaction to antihistamines that I was taking. So everyone kind of agreed with me, like maybe this is allergies. I don't know. So anyways, I ended up moving back to Florida in October, and all these symptoms kind of started in July. So from July to October, I was just like trying to find some answers. I met with an integrative primary physician. I talked to my cardiologist, and then I also met with a local allergist and immunologist there. So the cardiologist actually saw me and asked if maybe I was just eating too much salt. And again, I was fully plant-based, so that was a little bit hard for me to understand why you would ask that. I'll include pictures, but I was very, very swollen and my face was very, very round at the time. The primary integrative doctor that I was going to did a bunch of labs for me. We thought maybe it was some type of autoimmune response. I already had Hashimoto's before my diagnosis, so we thought maybe it could be something related to the Hashimoto's. So we started doing tons of labs. I think at the most I had 27 vials of blood taken at one time. And then at the same time I was going to her, I also started seeing an allergist in Florida because she wanted to do a full panel of allergy testing for Florida allergies and also California allergies to see if maybe that was the culprit. Unfortunately, I didn't respond to the typical needle test that you can do in the office where you get your results immediately. My metabolism's too slow for that, so we had to do labs. So it took 2 weeks to get the results. And she also tested for some autoimmune issues as well, because she is an immunologist. So she had a lot of knowledge in that area. And so we waited 2 weeks, got the results, everything came back negative. I went into her office and she was like, listen, everything's negative. I'm really concerned about how swollen your stomach is. The allergist, out of all the doctors I went to, I will say the allergist was the only one who said, start at the beginning. Let me hear your whole story. Like, what is going on? And luckily at the time I had put together a timeline of like when all my symptoms started, any big events, like where I was living, did I relocate? Things like vaccinations were included. I had gotten tattoos, so I included the dates of those. Like anything that I thought might trigger some type of maybe autoimmune response, I included on my timeline. And the allergist was really the only one who like sat with me and reviewed everything. So I felt like she had a really good understanding of where I was. And she also believed me. A lot of the other doctors I was seeing, like I was complaining about how swollen I was, and they were like, you know, you've only gained 15 pounds. So that's like pretty normal. I also, before I started having symptoms, I was training for a triathlon and I had competed in my first triathlon. So even myself, I was like, okay, well, you know, I was training really hard. Like maybe I'm just not training anymore. I'm traveling. I'm like eating good food. Maybe I just gained some weight. I don't like, maybe they're right to dismiss me. I don't know. So after getting the allergy test results and the autoimmune results and everything being negative, the allergist was like, okay, I'm very concerned about the swelling in your stomach. I'd really like to send you for a scan. And I was like, a scan? Like what? I've never like really been sick in my life aside from the Hashimoto's. And I was like, okay, I mean, we can go for a scan. That's fine. So my insurance denied the scan, and that allergist called them and did a peer-to-peer review and advocated for me. It was approved almost immediately after she had that phone call. I went in to get a scan, and when I was there, you know, the techs that are running the machines are not allowed to say anything. And in the middle of a scan, he was like, I don't think we have the area that your doctor wants to see. So I'm just going to call them really quick and see if we can get it approved for the full abdomen and hips. And I was like, okay, like that's fine. Like in retrospect, I think he probably saw a little bit of my tumor and he wanted to make sure we had a full picture of it. So very grateful for him as well. And 2 days after my scan, my allergist called me into her office and said she wanted to go over some things with me. Now, I will also say that in the meantime, I had gone back to my primary physician, and I mentioned that the allergist was having me get a scan. And my primary physician had me lay on the table and did a full exam, you know, pressing on my belly and everything. And she was like, I don't really know why she ordered a scan. Like, there's a very low chance of you having any type of tumor. And the chances would be even lower that it would be malignant. And I was like, oh, I mean, I don't know. She ordered it. Like, I trust her. So I'm just going to go through with it. So anyways, cut to, I got called into the allergist's office. She pulled my scan up and she was like, listen, you have a tumor that looks to be the size of a grapefruit. We think it's about 16 centimeters. It's on your right adrenal gland. We think it's a tumor called a pheochromocytoma, which is not malignant, but it does release hormones. And this could be very, very dangerous and the cause of your high blood pressure and all of your symptoms. From there, the allergist recommended that I work with my primary physician to find a surgeon that could operate on me, and then also find an endocrinologist. I did also then start doing my own research on who were the top surgeons in the country that could operate on a pheochromocytoma, because that's what I thought it was at the time. And it led me to finding the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. So I reached out to them immediately. They were super helpful. Their intake coordinator helped give me a list of what labs they would need in order to speak with me further, have me speak with one of their endocrinologists. So eventually I was able to finally secure an appointment with a local endocrinologist, and he was able to start running tests on me with Any type of like adrenal tumor, there are like very standard tests that you should have done, lab work, a urine sample, a 24-hour urine sample is pretty standard as well. So we started that process together. So I was able to send all those labs to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, and they called me the following morning and they said our endocrinologist would really like to chat with you today. So in my mind, I was like, oh cool, finally a doctor that's kind of on my wavelength. We want to move quick. We want to get this pheochromocytoma out, all of that. So I hopped on a Zoom with her the next morning. Her name's Dr. Irina Binkos, and I only mention that because she's phenomenal. And I sat down with her, and she got on and basically said right away, we don't think this is a pheochromocytoma. We do think it's a malignant tumor called adrenocortical carcinoma. I had never even heard of this cancer before, never even knew there was adrenal cancer. And so a lot of people ask me like, oh, like, what was your reaction when she said that? Like, did you go into shock? Like, what did you think? And I will say, yeah, I mean, I think when you're 32 and you hear that you have like this rare aggressive cancer, because the cancer only affects 1 in a million people in the US annually. So it's extremely rare. But when you're 32 and hear that, it's like, okay, what? But at the same time, I had been living in this place of being undiagnosed for months and chronically ill at the time. I mean, my feet were so swollen, I couldn't even fit my feet in shoes anymore. I kept tripping over my feet and falling because they were so heavy and swollen. I felt like I couldn't even go outside with having some type of reaction. And so there was a part of me that was just so happy to have an answer and to have a diagnosis, even though it was a very scary diagnosis. I was just so relieved that somebody like knew a plan. And so our plan from there was I flew up to Rochester. I had my surgery done the day before Thanksgiving. I had about 7 surgeons involved. I will say the Mayo Clinic did a great job. So I had my lead surgeon, who's an abdominal surgeon and works a lot with adrenal cancer. But then there was also a vascular surgeon involved. The tumor turned out to be 24 centimeters and 3.2 pounds. It had actually, so that's about the size of a football. It had wrapped around my vena cava, which is the vein that helps carry blood to your legs and arms, which is likely why my feet and hands were so swollen. So with adrenocortical carcinoma, you never want to biopsy the tumor, and you always have to remove it fully. You don't want to like cut it in any way or risk breaking it in any way. And so rather than cutting the tumor off my vena cava, they actually cut my vena cava and then fused it back together right where the tumor was touching. And they were able to safely extract my tumor. It was ruptured a little bit at the top. Once they cut me open, they were able to see that, like it had already been ruptured a little bit. But they were able to get it all safely out, and they did not have to remove my kidney, which was awesome. But I did also have a spot on my liver that was about the size of a golf ball. So they had to cut that. And then it was touching a little part of my diaphragm. So they had to cut a tiny piece of my diaphragm and then repair that as well. So it was about a 6.5-hour surgery. And it was an open surgery. So I have a giant scar on my stomach, but I'm very okay with that. For a long time, I was like kind of mad at myself for assuming it was allergies, because I felt like when I would go to a doctor and say, I think this is allergies, that almost hindered me because they weren't really thinking, what else could this be? They were just like, oh, she thinks it's allergies. That's probably what it was. But in a way, I'm really grateful I thought it was allergies, because it brought me to the allergist. And I really don't know how much longer. First of all, I don't know how much longer I would have lasted. Like, I was not in a good place. My blood pressure was super high. I was afraid I was going to have a heart attack at all times. I remember one night, like going to sleep, like I fell asleep and then I jolted awake in bed and like breathed in really deep. So I'm 99% sure my heart stopped at some point, or I stopped breathing at some point. And so I don't really think I would have lasted very longer. So I am glad that I thought it was allergies and that it led me to an allergist and immunologist who is so thorough. So when I was out in California, I started going to a acupuncturist named Susan. She was amazing. And she was also very concerned. She was like, this is not normal. Like, what is the timeline of events? And she was the person who encouraged me and like literally sat with me and put together a timeline of events and was asking great questions like, emotionally, what did you go through? And I had gone through a breakup recently and wasn't really thinking that, but sometimes, the body does crazy things under stress. You never know. And so I was like, oh, okay, went through a breakup, moved back to Florida, then started traveling. She's like, okay, were you living in any basements, like anything where there could be mold? Like, were you exposed to anything? Like, what's your travel history? And I had previously lived in Thailand teaching for 2 years. So I'm like, oh, let me add that to the timeline. Like, you don't know what could have affected me. So she was the reason I was able to put together a very thorough timeline. And then also I put together like comparison photos, like right before I started experiencing symptoms and then what I was looking like. So I would notice my face was really swollen and my stomach was really distended at night. And so I would snap pictures, like selfies in the mirror of that, and then just put together comparison photos. So eventually I ended up creating an entire binder that had all of my health history, every doctor I had been to, every symptom I was experiencing, any supplements I was taking, anything like that, just like anything that could potentially help. I also printed out pictures and included those in the binder. And then as I started getting lab work and things like that, I would just include that all there so that I was like bouncing around and going to different specialists. I would just bring that with me and be like, here's everything. I also think if you show up to an appointment with a binder, people take you more seriously. And I hate to say that, but it's true. I've also listened to a lot of podcasts on chronic illness and learned that you shouldn't get, all dressed up to go to your appointments. Like show up looking your worst because they will take you more seriously. And it's true in my experience as well. And I hate that it's like that, but it is. I want to say just one more thing about self-advocacy, because this is something I think a lot of people struggle with as well. It's okay to question your doctor. If you, first of all, don't understand what they're saying, you can say, stop, like, I don't understand the words you're using, first of all. It's also okay to say, like, I don't agree with this test, or why aren't you testing this, or push for a scan if you think you need one. And then if somebody's not listening to you, it's okay to find another doctor. You're paying them, you're hiring them. So if somebody's not listening to you, move on. And I know there is some privilege in what I'm saying, and not everybody can like bounce around and see doctors the way I have, but finding somebody who's going to listen is so, so, so crucial. So with adrenocortical carcinoma, there's really only one approved drug, one approved treatment. That's a systemic treatment. It is called Lysidren, or Mitotane is the brand name. And it's a chemo pill. But despite the fact that it's a pill, it's still very, very harsh, and it's not tolerated by everyone. And I want to mention that because I think sometimes you say, oh, I'm taking a chemo pill, or I'm going to be on a chemo pill. People are like, oh, that's easy. Like you could just do that from home. This is not an easy one. It is not an easy one. So the plan was, the advice that I got from the Mayo Clinic was, you're going to go back to Florida and you're going to work with your local oncologist to determine a plan. But we're going to review your case with our tumor board and also make sure that like these are the options that everybody agrees with. So they told me it would likely be mitotane, possibly radiation, but that was kind of up to me. Radiation is still there's not a lot of data for it. There's not a lot of data for adrenal cancer in general because it's so rare, but there really have not been a lot of studies with radiation in general. And, there are some risks involved with radiation. So they wanted to make sure I was aware of that. And then they said there also might be an option to try an IV chemo called EDP chemo as well. I also did make the decision to do radiation to my adrenal bed. There was a study done at the University of Michigan that showed it lowered the chances of recurrence. And you only had about until 3 months after surgery to do it. Like that's the most effective time. So I made the decision to have that, and it was 28 rounds to the adrenal bed. So every day, my mom and I were driving from St. Pete, Florida to Tampa, Florida for radiation to complete those 28 rounds. So I did Monday through Friday, and then I'd have the weekend off. Keep in mind, I had also started my chemo pill, so I was on that too, and I just felt like garbage all the time. The radiation really, really affected my nausea, unfortunately. So about 3 months after I started the chemo pill, I had my first follow-up scan. So with adrenal cancer, it's standard to get a scan every 3 months. Unfortunately, my first scan showed that it had metastasized to my liver and lungs. And then I was complaining about pain in my back, which my mom and I thought was a result from driving so much back and forth. But I was at the point where I was sitting on pillows like constantly because it hurt so bad just to sit. So we ended up doing an MRI and confirmed that I had two spots in my spine. We found two more spots in my spine and a spot on both of my hips. So it was two spots on my hips and four on my spine, a couple of lesions in my liver and some lesions in my lung. And then, so through that, what we decided to do was at this time, my adrenal bed radiation was done. So I continued on the mitotane. They started me on EDP chemo, which is an infusion chemo. And then I had radiation, SBRT radiation, which is like more specific for bones. It's a little bit more targeted. So I had that done to all of my bone metastasis. And luckily, none of them have shown any activity or growth since that. So we love that. I think they said for me, SBRT it's like 90% effective. So I liked those odds. But then shortly after I was done with that radiation, I started having pain in my shoulder. I thought my shoulder was broken. Like I woke up one day and thought my shoulder was broken. It hurt so bad and I was screaming, which like I have a very high tolerance for pain. And I kept telling my mom, my arm's broken. Something's wrong. My arm's broken. So she rushed me to my cancer center in Tampa. They put me in urgent care and they did an MRI of my shoulder and found another lesion on my shoulder. All of my bones were stable, and I think my lungs weren't growing too much, but my liver lesions almost doubled in size. So we were like, okay, this isn't working. We need a new plan. And so my oncologist decided to start immunotherapy, Keytruda, it's not FDA approved for ACC specifically, but a lot of people have started seeing results. And then they paired it with a chemo pill called lenvatinib, or Lenvima is the brand name. That's another thing. It's not approved for ACC specifically, but we're seeing a lot of success with the combination there. So I'm in a lot of ACC support groups through Facebook. And at the time, I didn't know anybody else that was on the combo that I was on. So I very much felt like a guinea pig, but it worked. So over the years, I've been consulting with specialists in the country, like across the country, because ACC is so rare. We only have about 5 specialists really in the country. And so for me personally, it's really important to see somebody who's treated at least at least 10 cases of ACC. I think that's a good threshold to have. And so I had been working with the NIH, Dr. Del Rivero at the NIH in Maryland. And then Dr. Foho, who's at New York Presbyterian, I went to see him for a visit. And then I also started consulting with MD Anderson in Houston as well. And so in November, you do have to go to MD Anderson in person to be evaluated. I was like, you know what, just for me and for my mental health, it's going to make me feel so much better to just have another opinion. I'm also very, very lucky that my team in Florida is super collaborative and like very open to collaborations. I think that's another problem a lot of people in the cancer world run into, unfortunately, is like egos get involved, and sometimes physicians aren't as collaborative as I think we all wish that they were. I'm very lucky that that's not the case for me, and everybody's super duper collaborative. So we love that. So I flew out to MD Anderson and was evaluated there, which included a PET scan, and I had not had a PET scan in a while. And so the PET scan revealed that none of my tumors are currently active. They basically don't light up on a PET scan, which is great. Even my lungs and liver aren't lighting up anymore. I think with any cancer, it's so important to remember that like nobody's story is your story. Like you have a unique case. And when you simply just read an article or a study, you're not getting all those details about like, okay, well, what kind of health were these people in before cancer and all of that. And I just felt like, you know, the mind is a very powerful thing. I follow Dr. Joe Dispenza, who's doing a lot of research on meditation and how, you know, what you tell yourself in your mind controls your body and controls your cells. And this isn't like woo-woo stuff. This is data. I mean, he's collecting the research on it and it's really incredible. And so I started paying attention to his research very early in my diagnosis, and I think that that's helped me maintain a pretty good headspace throughout. And like I said, I'm not going to say there weren't dark days, like there weren't terrible days, like there definitely have been. But I also think now that I'm stable and doing better, it's a lot easier to have a more positive mindset. Um, so, I don't know. Tomorrow's not promised for anybody, right? But all I know is I'm here today. So I'm like doing my best to live my best life and enjoy every moment. So one thing that was really important to me was getting back to traveling. I love to travel, and it's like such a core part of who I am. And I felt like cancer robbed me of that for a little while. So as soon as I felt like I could start traveling and my team agreed, I would say, especially if you're living with, a late stage diagnosis, just know that it's not the end of your life. It's okay. I've been stage 4 now for 2.5 years, and I live a pretty normal life for the most part.
I'm really happy. Oh, are we going now? Oh my god. Oh my god. I love it so much. So I am.
Cancer does not have to rule your life. And yes, while it's a big part of my life, it's not the center of my life. I think for a little bit, there when I was going through excessive treatments and all of that and was extremely tired, it's really hard to kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel. But just know that there is one, and like you can get there. And also just keep surrounding yourself with positive people who believe in you, and who make plans with you. And even if you have to cancel those plans, I've had to cancel plans a million times, but my friends understand every time I make a plan, there's always a chance I'm not going to feel well and I might have to cancel. But it's so important for me and my mental health to keep making plans and to keep having things to look forward to.